are back yet again. Episode 6.
Wow.
We reached
God.
6, girl.
Half a dozen.
Episode 6 of Rock the Boat 868, the podcast. I'm Abeo.
And I'm Amanda.
Thanks for joining us yet again. Hey, we have to really give you a lots and lots of love in terms of your reception of episode 5 and how much fun we had with Soyini. We're so glad that you all enjoyed it. I mean, we've been getting rave reviews from folks who really have become bona fide in terms of the conversation that we had with Soyini last week. So we, of course, want to again send lots of love and thank you to Soy for hanging with us last episode. We on our own this episode. I did want to invite a guest to chat with us about this, but I really wanted it to be just the right person. The person that we had in mind was unavailable, so we're going to save him. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but we're going to save him for a little bit later down the road. But I think, though, that we could handle the things that we're planning to talk about today. So fear not. But how have things been going with you, Amanda?
Good, I mean, I continue to struggle because being a creative in Trinidad, as you know, we spoke about that with Soyini. And also just managing feelings during COVID-19. But apart from those things, I'm fine.
Managing feelings in COVID-19 is a serious thing, Mental and emotional health and well-being during this time is especially important. So I just want to, again, just reach out, remind the people listening in to take care of your mental and emotional selves. We trapped, like if we kind of on a hamster wheel, this desperately trying to make ends meet at a time like this. You go to work, you come back home, you're dealing with youngsters, for those of you who have smallies, etc., with the homeschool, and it feels like a little bit of a deadly cycle that you're stuck in, like a time warp. Take a moment. You are allowed to take a moment.
Yeah. One friend of mine had to remind me that, it's okay. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel mad and to have no reason for it. We are in 2020. This year gave us a lot that we weren't prepared for. And we just coping.
Every reason to how you're coping.
Yes,
how you're coping. It really it has given us every reason to feel all the feelings this year.
Right.
I need to feel all the feelings, But there's a lot happening in TNT and the world at large, here at home. Girl, you see they finally sent, girl, you see Gary finally went willingly on his vacation.
He went?
Yes, girl. He went.
What?
Yes, he went.
Oh, he was quiet.
You don't find him quiet?
I really find Gary Griffith quiet.
Very quiet these days.
So he's not in the country?
No, girl. Hashtag gone.
Okay.
Hashtag gone.
Hashtag gone.
But we're not talking about Gary today at all. I'll give you the little heads up as to what we're planning to talk about today in just a bit. But I have to digress because I find it very interesting. So you realize they brought in 2 Bayesian police officers. They've been sworn in as SRPs. They're staying in a busy hotel in Port of Spain under quarantine.
This is the DSS
to
situation.
Specifically investigate the DSS situation. It's almost as if we don't trust our own law enforcement to handle the investigation because himself can't investigate himself now, can they?
It's almost as if we have a particular distrust of the DSS as well, a distrust that has not been given to corporate society in Trinidad and Tobago, even though we know they are steeped in corruption as well. So it has to beg the question, what is the particular thing about the DSS that brings this level of distrust?
Now, I am not negating the fact that within the whole DSS equation, I'm almost certain that there are illegal, nefarious elements in the mix. I am not negating that.
Correct.
Quite worthy of attention.
Correct.
And very concerning that our own law enforcement may be involved on some level. Yes?
Indeed.
But then at the same time, Gail, why is your phone on?
I know. I'm sorry. I'm turning it off right now, TNT.
But we must also ask the very tough questions about what is so attractive about the DSS. Because you see another one popped up in Tobago. What is so attractive about this framework, this pyramid scheme to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? It must mean that there is something missing within the existing, supposedly legal framework that our citizens feel as though they cannot find, which is why they are turning to these pyramid schemes. Can we talk about that, or we not? Yeah. We're not planning to talk about it.
And well, desperate times breed desperate measures. And when you have a salary relief grant or a cultural relief grant that people try to access
and can't,
then,
and the only thing they ask is what color panty you have on when you're signing the forms,
right? So people look towards these schemes. I mean, 2 people try to inveigle me in the DSS.
2 people?
2 people, girl.
And 2 people come to you?
2 people.
Nobody ain't come to me, girl. I feel a little left out. Nobody asked me nothing.
I get the whole story about how your flower will blossom.
Blossom? You get the blossom speech?
Girl. But only just shame because it's a person I know and I had to continue interacting with them.
Oh Lord. So you wouldn't bust the mark as to who.
Exactly.
But TNT, I mean, this is not what we plan to talk about today, but it would have been remiss of me. Because I love a little busy backs every now and again. It would have been remiss of me not to mention that Gerald is no longer in the country. And as he exited stage left, the 2 Bajan officers entered stage right.
Well, you know what old people say, 2 man rat can't live in the same hole.
Thank you.
This case 3. So
it's going to be interesting. Trust me, Rock the Boat 868 will be monitoring it. We will. And we will keep you abreast of all of the situations as they emerge and unfold. But let me get into what we're talking about today. Today we're talking textbooks. Today we're talking education, actually. We're getting it out of the system. And we're starting to talk about education reform in a real way. And we're calling it part 1 of potentially many. Because this is not something that we could just talk about in one go. We have to do this in parts. So today we're talking textbooks. And I'll explain to you why and how talking about this today emerged. Yeah, so we'll get it out of the system as we talk about exactly how textbooks are selected for our school curriculum. What's the criteria for the textbooks, the author, who does review, who is the gatekeeper, all them kind of thing. We're going to talk about that. For our remember when, we're going to look outside of TNT. It's still the diaspora. It is the seat of the diaspora, so to speak. We're taking it to the African continent, and we're going to look back just very, very briefly on South Africa, when South Africa would have ended its apartheid and what that would have meant for the continent and what that would have meant for people across the diaspora and how the diaspora united. And we're going to use that as a framework to talk about what's going on right now in Nigeria as it pertains to the whole #EndSARS movement that's been going on and all the bloodshed and death and pain that's been happening over there, and also to why international voices, global leaders, etc., haven't necessarily been paying the kind of attention that they probably should be. And so that, literally, you know what I'm going to save? I have a question for the Caribbean Examination Council, but I'm going to save what the question is until we get it. And then when we're talking about how we're spending money, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite girls. I have loved this young lady for a few years, well. And I don't know if you all remember the name Thema Williams. Thema Williams. We're gonna mention Thema. We're gonna highlight Thema in the how we spending we money. So a lot to look forward to inside of episode 6. Yes, we digressed a little bit, but it was necessary. So stay close to us. We're gonna take a short break and come right back. All right, we're back.
Hi.
We're back, and we're getting it out of the system. Amanda and I just made a pact that we're going to talk about this for half an hour because we're going to try to keep the episodes an hour. But famous last words, because this is a lot.
Well, all you know we by now, so...
We rambly wenches, you know?
If you don't know me...
By now,
That's
bubble on the line, bubble, yes.
Careful, okay. Beyonce's going to come and try to get on this track.
All right, so we're talking, we're getting it out with system. And the system in particular today we're talking about is the education system. Okay, so once upon a time, my last born goddaughter, I am godmommy of champions. I love the fact that I have beautiful women in my life who've made children on my behalf, right? That I can give back. So my third born goddaughter, her mother posted some interesting things online, some screenshots of concerning things that popped up inside of a textbook. Now, hold on, let me get the busy screenshot as to what would have popped up inside of this textbook. Have I found? Yes, I have found it. I have. So she posts, words mean things, followed, came as slaves. This is a book written for us, by us. The wording isn't accidental. # primary school pump. So of course, my curiosity was piqued. She posts a picture from what I assume is a social studies textbook. And the excerpt goes a little something like this. Marissa then speaks on behalf of her group. She tells the class that the Europeans followed the Amerindians. The Europeans brought different languages. Asha speaks next. She says that her group looked at the Africans. The Africans followed the Europeans. The Africans came as slaves to work on the sugar estates. Sunil then speaks on behalf of his group. His group looked at the East Indians. They were the next set of people to come to our islands. The East Indians also came to work on the sugar estates. They were paid workers. Choi is the next person to speak. His group talked about the Chinese. The Chinese followed the East Indians. They too came to work on the sugar estates. However, many of them went elsewhere. And so it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And it is very interesting, the use, the language, as she says, There's another excerpt in the very same textbook where there's a picture. Let's get to the picture, right? There's a picture and it's lots and lots of children dressed up in costumes sitting around a table. Now, the picture is the most ambiguous. If you look at this picture, ain't nothing about this picture look remotely Trinidad and Tobago. There's a child dressed as an Eskimo. I'm seeing a child dressed as a cowboy. There's a child dressed in what seems to be something resembling Native American wear. There's one dressed in what seems to be Mexican garb. There's a child dressed in something that seems to be African tribal wear. And then her question is, the question asks, under the picture, what nations do the children in the picture represent? How many more girls are there than boys in this picture? And 3, the children are wearing their national costumes. Point to the national costume you like best and say why. Well, you're in a standard 1 primary school social studies book. Of all the banal. And this ain't just it, right? This is just to give you the context of what is going on in our schools. The textbook. Parents, are you opening the textbooks?
Yeah.
Or have you? Because this is not a new textbook from what I'm realizing to the syllabus. So have parents been opening the textbook, or is it only now because children home and they're being schooled at home, they're doing Zoom school?
Yeah. Well, that is a good point that you're making, because one of the problems with the education system is it becomes kind of the surrogate parents. The surrogate parents. So teachers are responsible for children between the hours of 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. And we have to question just what involvement parents make in ensuring that their children are receiving the education that they are being promised. Right? And then further to that, when we have national issues like different things that popped up in this year, we like talking about the appointment of the chief of police, etc. And And people seem to be left in a realm of mystery as to the process that leads to this. When a lot of these things are discussed in social studies textbook, or should be discussed in social studies textbook, then we have to ask then, if it wasn't for 2020, with all the virtual platforms for education, then what was happening before? And we have to also do some investigation into exactly how long, and then make an assessment about just how far the problem extends and make some suggestions about how to correct that.
Amanda, the mind boggles. Like, there are so many things I want to ask. Like, there are so many things I want to ask. The author of this textbook is technically somebody you could, like Amanda said it in a discussion, in our discussion before we started to record today, in terms of who is the author of the textbook.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I get the screenshot right. The author of this particular textbook, according to his Facebook profile, is Frank M. Porter, right? In 2001, Frank M. Porter was appointed the 8th National Director of the Youth for Christ, Trinidad and Tobago. Since that time, he has been ordained a pastor and currently serves as an assistant pastor at Divine Encounter Fellowship International under the leadership of Apostle Joseph Vernon Duncan. Plenty more things about him being a pastor. He is also the author of many books, including the iconic Republic Reader series, Educating Children. Many. Dude been around since Boyo and Kala.
Yeah, I mean, Frank M. Porter.
Big eye, tin foot, and what was the next one? Broadmouth.
Oh,
Big eye, tin foot, and broadmouth.
A distinguished part of our generational ethos. So many people from our generation could remember growing up with Republic Readers, Boyo and Kala, poems that we remember, all of these things written by Frank M. Porter. But look, in 2020, Frank M. Porter now
talking about followed
conversation.
Thank you.
About how history and how the facts of history are framed or contextualized and presented to very young, impressionable minds.
Because when you use language like this set followed this set, and this set followed this set, and this set brought this set, and I remember the term brought being used a lot, even in my days, about which group brought what to Trinidad and Tobago. And for me, the language is damaging.
Yeah.
And there are those who will say, well, okay, this child is standard 1 age. Now, everybody thinks their child is the brightest and is the biggest prodigy ever, whatever. But I'm saying it's in big. My child is a prodigy. And yes, she's my child. Right? And she, for her age, her critical analysis and thinking and the kinds of conversations that she would have with her birth mother, because I am also her mother, her birth mother is the kinds of in terms of what she would have been seeing going on with Black Lives Matter, etc. So she and the mother would have had certain conversations about history and what is happening now, and what history, how history would impact what is happening now, etc. Yeah. So when she opens a textbook and you see this kind of language, which is wishy-washy, nondescript, it's neither here nor there, it's damaging.
Damaging also because it suggests these groups of people had some complicity.
Thank you.
In what happened to them.
Thank you.
And that's not justice.
It's really not. And the point is, if it is you frame it this way when they're in standard 1, are we doing anything to correct how we frame it by the time they get to standard 5, by the time they get to secondary school, by the time they get to the level of CXC and CAPE? Have we changed how it's been framed? Have we changed how it's been framed? Which is why you see people having real misconceptions as to what happened to various demographics in this society, which places them in the positions that they have now been placed, because they literally have not been taught the history.
But these are people who also say that Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovered the quote unquote new world.
Wow. When the truth and in fact is the man was a pillager and a rapist who didn't know how to use a compass and landed up in the wrong place when where he really wanted to be was in India.
Exactly. And African heritage people are not here because they were slaves existing in Africa.
And they came willingly.
And somebody went and promised them a vacation to the Caribbean. No. They were brought here by people who had deep-seated political, racist influence reasons for their economic benefits.
Thank you very much. I could not say it better. And I mean, yes, our allegiance to diasporic conversation is quite real and quite important. But even the way that discussed the East Indians who followed, as they say, the Africans and came as paid workers. If that doesn't do damage to what the experience of indentureship actually was, I don't know what is.
Absolute rubbish.
I don't know what is. And there has to be a way to frame this with a lot more authenticity and truth for children who are 6 in a way that they can grasp and understand and have conversation within their realm of understanding. But that shit ain't it.
And then beyond that, within the same story, to further reduce the facts of history, are the names used.
Thank you.
So the Indian boy name is Sunil. The Chinese boy name
Choi.
is Choi. I mean, that's racist.
In itself, their group focused on. So is it that you put a group of Chinese children together? Is it that how the...
Thank you.
Is it that the way the classroom works?
And this is not to say there's no Indian boy named Choi. Listen, I mean, named Sunil. And Sunil, if you're listening to this, hi. But for you to reduce this in such a way so that the reader has to identify this as an Indian by his name, or the reader has to identify this as a Chinese by his name, then something about the thinking that generated this piece is incorrect in terms of racism, incorrect in terms of just
academic and critical analysis.
Academic and critical analysis, and just a poor historicization as well.
We coming back to that, eh?
Yeah.
And we're talking about this as a framework for what we come in with. The picture that deals with the children, the Amanda, I wish our listeners, in fact, you know what? I'm going to actually put the screenshots of each of these excerpts so you could see how ridiculous this picture is. Y'all seeing this picture? Why is this picture in our Republic Reader of whether it end up it's not in the Republic Reader, it's the social studies textbook. I don't have the name of the textbook right here in front of me, but it's very easy to find the textbook. It's a textbook that's one of the textbooks that's being used for Standard 1 students in Trinidad and Tobago. Why is this picture in the textbook? And how exactly are children supposed to, what nations do the children in the picture represent? You've reduced nations to costumes in a picture?
Yeah.
What trash is that? This is what we teach in our children? This is what our taxpaying dollars going to? Trash. Call Nayan and the other lovely lady, the 2 women that's supposed to save the education system, and tell them this book is trash. Take it off. Take it off. Put it in a bin because it's trash. Right, so that is the framework. Now that I got that out of my system, we give you context, eh? So when I saw this and I had all of these various questions, and that's just the tip of the iceberg with Amanda, and I said we're only talking about this for half an hour. Where we reach, we done start bad, eh? We done start bad. Anyhow, my question then was, how does a textbook like this end up on the syllabus? How? So it took us to, sorry.
There you go. This is what
Right. No, go back. We are on the Ministry of Education website. moett.gov.tt.textbook-management-unit, right? So the textbook management unit.
moe.gov.tt/textbook management.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Let me go to the top of this page right here. So just a little insight. The textbook management unit. Did you know it was a textbook management unit?
Again, I'm teaching for nearly 20
And
years.
you never knew it have a
that.
textbook management unit.
But then maybe I needed to do some research.
What I did know before doing this little bit of research was that I knew that principals and heads of departments had a certain level of autonomy in terms of what books they select. Yes?
That is true. Yes.
Right. But what I did not know is how do we get to that point?
Yeah.
Okay? There needs to be a selection of books that they can then choose from. So how do we get that initial list? Right. So submission of learning material. If you scroll down, actually go back up a little bit, right? It tells you, it gives you a little thing about the textbook management unit. general information, textbook selection, new textbook policy. Actually, let me read textbook selection. At present, the textbook selection policy allows principals the autonomy to select textbooks based on the students' needs, as well as maintaining alignment with the curriculum. This is known as the freedom of choice option. It's based on a set procurement cycle. Sound fancy, eh? New textbook.
Sounds fancy and problematic.
Yeah. Right?
You have to just hope that the principal of the school is...
Yes. So if no
aware.
if you is not friends with not a single principal, your well-researched textbook with all of your academic qualifications behind your name, your ass is grass.
So basically you're saying what your children receive depends largely on the interest of the school principal.
Yes. But before we get to but that in a way is, if you have 10 steps, I think by the time you reach to the principal, that's probably step 5. He or she somewhere in the middle of the process.
Once it's in alignment with the curriculum, it's still...
Right. New textbook policy. Consideration is being given to revise the textbook policy. Okay, bless God, because whatever it is right now ain't it. In which a proposal is made to re-establish a learning materials evaluation committee, This is the part that I like. Submission of learning material. The Ministry of Education Learning Material Committee extends an open call to publishers and authors to submit for review learning materials and textbooks to be used at the primary and secondary levels. Moderators and reviewers are also requested to review learning materials submitted by authors, publishers to use at the primary school and secondary levels. Full information in links below. So, Amanda, you ever see an open call for to submit, write poems and things? Suppose you publish a little book tomorrow, you decide you would like this book to be considered for literature, whatnot. How you ever see a call? Because I never see a call.
Never in my whole professional life seen a call of any kind related to material for textbooks, to submit material for textbooks. So this is news to me. And that is not to say that
we know everything.
I mean, it probably does on Trinidad and Tobago. If any one of you has seen an advertisement, please feel free to let us know.
Right, so you went to a nice page just now.
Right.
It was saucy. It had saucy things on it. Submission requirements. Please proceed.
Submission procedures. The procedure for the submission of learning materials are as follows. Advertisements are posted in the daily newspapers inviting publishers, authors, producers to make submissions for review. The advertisements indicate inter alia the kinds of materials required for review, example, textbooks, the school level and subject area for which submissions are invited, the number of copies of submissions required, the required review cost per submission, and the deadline date for submission.
The cost per submission. So you have to pay to submit. So you're paying a little chunk of change to get people to read your textbook and think, we still don't know who are the people reviewing, eh? We still don't know who that is. Authors and publishers are required to pay the following fees to the Ministry of Education for each title per level submitted for review. Mind you, most times when a school picks a textbook, textbooks have certain, the standard 1 book, the standard 2, standard 3, and they're using the same author throughout the school.
Well, this is why I'm glad we had the name Frank M. Porter, because remember, is every level of primary school had Republic readers. Eh?
Nice.
And within Republic readers, he has poems and essays.
Listen. So you're paying for every single title per level submitted for review. $2,400 per primary school level submission example book series, $3,600 per secondary school level submission 1 to 5, $2,600 per secondary school level form 6. Payments to be made via manager's check addressed to the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Education. All year. This thing serious, you know?
Yeah, that sounds so
This thing real serious. Because what you are saying is the mess that we just read. And the thing is, I'm sure Frank is a lovely fellow. I'm sure he's quite lovely. This is not a personal attack on Frank.
No.
It's not a personal attack on Frank. I enjoyed Abeo and Carla when I knew no better. I enjoyed
the
it.
Kiskadee.
The Kiskadee.
I know you by your yellow chest.
You little Kiskadee. I mean, we enjoyed it. Great. But now we beg and we have sense.
Exactly.
We beg and we have sense. And let's be real. We live in a...
Frank and Porter is not outside the bounds of accountability.
Thank you. This ain't it. We live in a world that has gotten so much smaller because of the interwebs and the social media, etc. We've seen what social movements around the world have looked like in terms of people starting to question the structures that are in existence, the structures that we inherited from colonialism. And it is time for our education systems to reflect that. If it is we say we're moving forward, if it is we have a prime minister who's saying, you know what, after we see the bear shite that happened during the elections, it's time for us to reintroduce civics into the curriculum. If we're starting to have those conversations, that just showed up in that Standard 1 book by Frank M. Porter, that ain't it. And I am not somebody who plays respectability politics. I hate it. I just tell people, I's a girl who does cuss and does whine, but does read things.
Yeah.
The balance.
I whine and read things.
I just whine, cuss, and read things. Okay? Right? There has to be some kind of measuring stick. And the measuring stick that we do have is academic work. What has been your area of interest, your area of study? What qualifies you to write a textbook to educate the children of Trinidad, to educate a nation?
And who are the people
It cannot be you
reviewing?
as the pastor of a church.
Right, and who are the people reviewing?
Thank you.
Who is the review committee? I mean,
and what is their body of work?
There's a Faculty of Humanity and Education at UE. How invested is the university in this process? And what are the criteria by which the final decisions are made?
Thank you.
Because if in 2020 there is still national debate concerning whether or not the Christopher Columbus statue should be removed and the reasons for that, and I am not saying that there are not valid reasons a person could put forward for why it should remain. I am saying the reason shouldn't be that Christopher Columbus discovered the New World.
Thank you.
And we found so many people entering the public arena to say bullshit like
Thank
this.
you.
So it has to beg the question, what level of education in history or what was in the material presented within the school system that would produce this type of thinking in a population? And then when you see things like this, thank you so much, Abeo, for bringing up this issue. When you see things like this and you realize that people are paying money to be published,
and so much so that the Publishers Association of Trinidad was vexed and took out a court order to try to prevent teachers from providing students who could not afford or had no access to internet and devices from photocopying material to give it to them, citing copywriting issues and whatnot. And yes, there was some level of validity, but again, where is the balance? Well, right, so you can't be telling me you're going to those ends, but on the back end, this is the framework that we're working with. Yeah. This is it, and it doesn't just apply to social studies. We have an issue in Trinidad and Tobago right about now as it pertains to conversations about gender identity, sex, sexuality. We still refuse to teach to do sex education in the schools. But maybe if we had learning material within the school system that made sense, maybe, let we say, a generation down the road, we would see less of man chopping off woman's head.
Thank you. And as
which we had just the other day.
As an author, I do understand the issue of intellectual property. I do get that. But what it requires is a conversation between all parties involved. There are endless things online. But what I got from the ministry in the bit that you just described is that capitalism is more important than education.
That is what it came down to for me.
Capitalism is more important than education. Profit, them coins, more important than children getting proper material to learn from, especially in 2020 when they're learning at home.
Listen, Ministry of Education, this ain't it, you know. This could never be it. There needs to be greater transparency in how you're selecting these textbooks. Who are the authors of these textbooks? I believe in body of work.
Same.
I believe in body of work, and that goes across the board in every single thing that we do in Trinidad and Tobago. Too much thing is die my friend, and I went to school with them, and I know them from body of work.
Some level of qualification for
Thank
which
you.
there is evidence that we could refer to.
Like, I need to see, like, can I see a thesis? Can I see an academic something? Can I see something, Frank?
You know,
or do I need to come to your
this.
church and sit down in a pew?
Nowadays, when people tell me they have a thesis, I always ask them, where is it published?
Thank you.
I want to go read. I like to read.
That's all I'm saying. And I know you see, sometimes we also have to be mindful that we don't end up being culprits of the very same thing that, we talk about in terms of respectability and all that kind of stuff. I am not saying that voices that don't have necessarily published work, so to speak, aren't valid, because there are some people who are solely practitioners, but they still have a body of work.
Exactly.
They still have a body of work.
But also, if it's the publishing arena you want to play your games in, then you have to abide by the rules of that arena.
Thanks.
I mean,
it's as simple as that, guys. Parents, I really do want to encourage you to open your children's textbooks. Open your children's textbooks. Start asking some questions. And start asking some questions of the principals and the teachers as to what books end up in the school. If the school has a PTA, quite frankly, the PTA should be involved in textbook selection. I don't know if there are schools that go that route, but I can't see why that shouldn't be a thing.
And also important to also have discussions with children. And I think this is what was really great about your friend, and that is she could have a discussion with her child. This is how we develop critical thinking in young people.
Right. It is important. This is, like I said, this is part one of how we talk about education reform in Trinidad and Tobago. This is just part one, because I have a sneaky suspicion, and I could be wrong, that it have some bubble inside of this. And this is not casting aspersions at Frank M. Porter, legend of and creator of Boyo and Gala. I'm just saying, just general, because this is not the only textbook where we've seen our good friend, Ram Charita.
Oh Lord.
Our good friend.
When life gives you lemons.
You understand? If we could get to he also has a textbook as well, which we would have seen, I think, earlier on this year, which also had some problematic passages.
Yes.
And whatnot.
Yes.
And he supposedly also, published, has academic work, etc. But at the same time, it still begs the question of what exactly. There are some people who could be published, but the ideologies and pedagogies on which their work is built on is problematic. And you have to question if that is what you want to communicate to a nation.
Exactly. I completely agree, especially a nation such as ours, in which we have a continuing and evolving conversation about the facts, our historical facts, and the context within which we want to frame those.
Absolutely. So you know what? Let me stick a pin there, because we coming back to kind of talk about education in the answer that, we coming back to talk about education in the answer that. But we're going to stick a pin there for now as it pertains to the textbooks. My thing is teachers who using this material in these schools, right? I grew up, my mother is a retired teacher. But she was a rebel. Surprise, surprise, my mother is a rebel. Surprise. Yeah.
One in a guy.
You understand? Right. And she would have given, when I showed her this, she gave me stories about her putting her foot down in her time about certain textbooks she refused to use. Where she said, I'm not using that textbook. I will use my own learning material. I will source things from various other textbooks, and that is what I will use with my students. Are there teachers out there willing to do that? Or is it that teachers don't see a problem with certain things? And then if the majority of teachers then are not seeing a problem with it, then do we also then need to address how we're training our teachers?
But we also have to be honest with ourselves. Among the teachers, we have also problematic people. We have racist teachers, classist teachers.
Who show their whole ass during elections.
Exactly.
Their whole ass.
Exactly. And then facing heterogeneous groups of children to deal with them. So, I mean, it's not just, I say this to say, it's not just textbooks, the process of reviewing textbooks that we need to question. We also have to question teacher selection and teacher management throughout their careers.
It's true. And it makes sense because the teaching fraternity is a microcosm of the rest of society. So if the rest of society has various levels of being problematic, then of course it will pop up within the teaching fraternity. Stands to reason.
And I say this as a teacher, understanding that teachers come under heavy oppression for all kind of bullshit, but that does not negate the fact that teachers are problematic. Some teachers are problematic people as well.
Yeah. I just don't, and it just boggles the mind that this is a textbook in a school and everybody cool.
Yeah.
Everybody cool and hunky-dory. I'm just wondering, to be fair, not everybody, because when she posted it online, couple people did pop up who are parents to say, I saw it and I had a problem with it and I had a conversation with my children. So there are some parents who are a little bit more informed, much more informed contextually, a little bit more conscious, so to speak, who will have a conversation. But I think it have to go beyond just having private conversations with your children. It had to be that you're picking up the phone and you're calling the teacher and you're calling the principal and you're calling the ministry. You're calling the school supervisors. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have a case where these textbooks get on the syllabus year after year after year in perpetuity, and this can't be it. All right, I'm done. When we come back, we're going to remember when. And it's a heavy one inside of the remember when today. Stay with us. All right, TNT, we're back. And we're getting ready to remember when. And this remember when was born out of the fact that, born out of what is happening right now in Nigeria, as it pertains to the whole End SARS movement. But we'll get back to exactly what that is in just a bit. But the reason why I was, again, and this is not the first time I've thought of this, I thought about this too when the Black Lives Matter movement was at a kind of very hysterical peak just after George Floyd's killing, and the world really was coming together in solidarity. And I remembered South Africa. And I know there'll be people who are a lot older than me who'd be like, wish she know about South Africa? Wish she remember. I remember being a child and my mother wearing her Winnie Mandela t-shirts, and I remember reading about Nelson Mandela. I remember seeing the movies Sarafina, and I remember there was context. It was a very clear international, a very clear global movement as it pertained to rallying behind Black people, Black lives. It was literally one of the earliest precursors to Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter movement.
From the little reading and research now, the 1960s would have been what we just saw, would have been the first time really that the world really started to pay attention to what was happening in South Africa re-apartheid, right? Because of massacres that would have happened. But it wasn't until a full 2 decades later that the end of apartheid really happened, so to speak. The very, very late 1980s.
As the title of Nelson Mandela's book, Long Walk to Freedom.
It was a long
walk.
Long walk, right? And speaking of Nelson Mandela's freedom, he wasn't freed until 1990.
Yes.
And he didn't become president until 1994. So this was a long process. But what I do remember is all the We Are the World, all the oh gosh, there was a huge rally. I will never forget the images from the rally.
Yes.
The Free Nelson Mandela rally.
Yes.
That didn't even happen in South Africa. There was one that there were versions of the rally that happened in pockets around the world. There's a big one that happened, of course, in South Africa. But I think there was one that happened somewhere in Europe as well. A huge Free Nelson Mandela rally that went on. But then there was a big one too that happened where Nelson's daughter spoke. And these are like little things that I remember as a child. And I remember marveling as a child, of how the whole world came together for this moment in history and fighting injustice and just being very aware that it was our job as global citizens to lift our voices and fight injustice. And you know, when you're young and you're small and you have this very dotage idea that good always eventually reigns over evil, and then you grow up and realize that that's not necessarily how it works.
But you know, another thing I always found very interesting about that period is it impacted so much on the international psyche, that is with reflection on that period, that the term the Mandela effect was coined. Mandela effect, in that a large group of people could subconsciously agree to something that may or may not be true. The term Mandela effect, according to the very well mind, began when it was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broom, when she published a website detailing her observance of the phenomenon. Broom was at a conference talking with other people about how she remembered the tragedy of the former South African president. And basically a large group of us, at one point, myself included, thought Nelson Mandela died in prison.
Really?
When in fact he never died, and this was never a part of news. But we were so much caught up in this heroism of Mandela that subconsciously a community of people, an international community of people,
an entire diaspora.
Yeah. And this is why I really like this Remember When. Because if we're talking about things like international solidarity around causes, and in this case causes related to Black lives, we definitely have to talk about South Africa, apartheid, specifically the role of Nelson Mandela, and how the international community viewed everything that was happening at that time.
And my thing is, how do we, I don't want to say recreate, because there's something about that feels inauthentic and performative. But in fact, we don't even need to, because in a lot of ways, what happened this year, this 2020 year of reckoning with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, which in a lot of ways has been around for quite a few years. This what happened this year was almost a resurgence of a movement that has been around almost for the better part of a decade, so to speak. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing happening right now in Nigeria. Because EndSARS, the hashtag EndSARS movement has been around for quite a few years, but it has only just resurged, so to speak. 5 things you should know about hashtag EndSARS. SARS is a Nigerian police force unit that stands for Special Anti-Robbery Squad. It was started to protect civilians from armed robbers. Really? Seriously?
We have a date for Gary Griffiths vacation. I just asking because I want to know.
You understand?
Asking for a friend.
My thing is to protect civilians from armed robbers, or to protect property. Really?
Or to protect the middle class.
It's so interesting when I read this, because I was like, this forces us to think about the fact that most law enforcement entities the world over, the diaspora over, particularly in territories that are descended from colonial legacies.
Post-colonial territories.
Right, post-colonial territories. These police constabulatories, as they were called, were never about protecting people in the ghetto, was never about protecting poor people. It was about maintaining the status quo and protecting the interests of middle and upper class, and not even necessarily really middle, more upper class than anything else. You know what I mean? And they weren't necessarily, and I am again not casting aspersions, because I'm sure there are police officers as individuals in Trinidad and Tobago who do a damn good job and they work hard, and you know, they're just trying to make a living for their family and all that kind of stuff.
And but indeed who empathize with these movements
as well. Yes, yeah. Great, because within everything there is nuance. But if we're talking frameworks and structures, originally constabularies were glorified gangsters. I'm saying it in there. They was glorified gangsters. That's what they were. And it was about making sure that poor people in the ghetto stayed in their place. So when you read that this entity, SARS, is a Nigerian police force unit that stands for Special Anti-Robbery Squad and was started to protect civilians from armed robbers, I call bullshit immediately. I'm like, ain't never. Over the past few years, there have been numerous allegations of police brutality from SARS operatives, with reports of violence, robbery, blackmail, predominantly targeting young people. I read also in another one too, where there were also incidents of sexual assault as well, right? Activists have campaigned against SARS for years. However, the most recent protest broke out after a video was circulated showing a young man being shot in Lagos. Now, my thing is, you saw what happened with George Floyd. Yeah. And what is happening the world over. Why would you try it? Like in 2020, why would you try it? Anyway, young people have since taken to the streets, risking their lives to demand change. Protests have spread globally with the hashtag #EndSARS. PS, there was a small group of Nigerians resident in Trinidad and Tobago who apparently protested yesterday. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. In solidarity with what's been happening in Nigeria. Second generation, third generation Nigerians in the US, in the UK, all over the world have been protesting in solidarity. There are a lot of actors and celebrities within the Hollywood framework, within the international music industry as well, who have a Nigerian heritage, who have also been lending their voice to this. Yes. So the movement is starting to pick up steam.
Last night, one of my friends was playing an appeal being made by a creative in Nigeria towards Beyonce, because so many Nigerian creatives contributed to Black is King.
Thank you. But the thing is, what's interesting, Beyonce Giselle, she did put out a statement before, but she received a little flack for it. And I understand where she was coming from, but I also understand where they're coming from, where she said, she stands in solidarity. We want to send aid and food and whatever. And Nigerians were like, whoops, excuse. We appreciate standing in solidarity and whatnot, but we don't need food. What we need is people helping amplifying the voices and calls for justice. We don't need food. We're not starving Biafrans.
And to disband SARS.
Thank you. That's not what we need. We don't need food. And they're totally within their right to tell people who are standing in solidarity what exactly they need.
Yeah.
We don't need signs painted on the road saying hashtag #EndSARS. Like they did for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. Don't give us everything else but what we're asking for.
And I totally understand that response to her, because we know one of the major critiques made against that film was its presentation of an Africa that never existed. Really, it's a mythical version of Africa, and she needs to, I believe, as a creative, as a person in Black skin, relates to the complexity of Africa that is being presented right now in Nigeria.
The Nigerian government has confirmed it will dissolve SARS. However, protests continue amidst concerns that it will simply be replaced with another unit, renaming the problem rather than resolving it. Yeah, because if you don't dismantle a system, the system continues. You just give it a new name. Well, it's like the prison system. So
they might name it SWOT.
Shady.
Look, I just did a search for SWOT, and one of the articles that came up is SWOT officers kill gunman. End SWOT.
End SWOT too. No, but y'all, this is an interesting, not interestingly, tragically, today is the who?
22nd.
Today's the 22nd of October. 2 days ago, Tuesday, actually, they instituted impromptu curfew in Nigeria. And then police opened fire on unarmed protesters. They've killed 70 plus people, numerous others injured. And it was all over social media. I actually came upon one of the videos, two videos that stood out to me and brought me almost close to tears, but for two different reasons. One, where you saw bodies just strewn on the streets in Lagos, like just bodies in the streets. And I'm like, it cannot be. And one of my favorite bloggers, Lavia Jai Jones, what she said is that there's a particular heartbreak that comes when it is your own people killing you. There's a special kind of heartbreak attached to that. It is particularly heartbreaking. And then there was another video where within the protests, now of course Nigeria is one of the seats of Yoruba culture, the seat of it. So within the protests, there were young protesters doing making offerings and doing libations to Ogun in the midst of the and I said to myself, now that is how you protest. That is it. And it gave it such a, there was nothing about it that was performative. It was just an authentic kind of a expression of protest, another expression of protest beyond what we have come to know protest to be, which is, placards and marching. But it felt so very important and so very real in the midst of all of the chaos that was going on around it. So I just really wanted to share this within the context of Remember When, and also ask the question of what will it take for the kind of unity that we would have seen for South Africa, that we would have seen for the United States, for George Floyd, to happen again for Nigeria. It's slowly starting to happen.
Yeah. I have a question for you as an activist.
God, that word, girl.
You know what?
That word, girl.
Yeah, that word. But as someone who initiated a call to action in solidarity with an international movement, what does that do to you psychologically when you see the extent of the work to be done?
The extent of the work to be done in what framework, what context?
I mean, after seeing what took place in the United States with George Floyd, being present in Trinidad and Tobago, knowing that we constantly bring up the police commissioner on this podcast, and with that comes certain threat, knowing that comes with certain threats to your person, what effect does it have on you psychologically to see what's going on in Nigeria?
I was actually having that conversation with an acquaintance on the good old socials, where I said, actually a good friend as well privately, where I told her it feels sometimes as though it is that living in black skin is an unspoken condemnation to death, and that we have so much work to do, that I feel like the kind of work that we have to do to dismantle the structures that really puts black personhood in danger, that sidelines it, that marginalizes it, that commodifies it, all the things that don't allow us to live. I mean, because we live in our fullness, we find our joy, etc. But we know the constraints under which we live, and these are constraints that are placed upon us. But we have found ways to thrive in spite of. But in order for us to actually get to the point where we could really do the work of dismantling those structures is about two generations, about 100 years. That's how much work we have to do. It's about 2 generations. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And anybody expecting it to happen tomorrow, to happen next year, that 2020 will be a magical fix-all. 2020 in a lot of ways needed to happen so that certain things could start, so that certain things could pivot. Oh, there's that word. But if we really think about the actual work that we have to do, like what we talked about with the textbooks and changing the language and reframing a system and that kind of stuff, is about 2 generations of work. Because there has to be behavioral change attached to structural and systemic change. one cannot happen without the other.
Yeah. So we understand that a generation of people will come who will understand what it is to live in black skin without being interrupted constantly by the world. But it might not, and perhaps we could say definitely not going to happen in our time.
It will not. It won't happen in our lifetime.
We have to do this work for that
to happen.
Eventually be
drip, drip, full buckets.
Like Martin Carter, the Guyanese poet, long is the march of men and long is the life and wide is the span.
So, Olia, on that note, we remembered when.
Indeed.
Let's do this, CNT. Answer that. And I have a question for the Caribbean Examinations Council.
CXC. This is for you.
CXC.
We talking to you.
And my question is, what the fuck though? Died my whole question for CXC.
Asking on
what
behalf.
What the actual fuck though?
Asking on behalf of all students who
wrote exams this year
in Trinidad and Tobago.
What the fuck?
In 2020.
Hannah. Olia. CXC, make it make sense. The maths is not maxing.
Yes, Abeo is exercising adult privilege to use the F word today.
The maths is not maxing. You know what, Amanda? When I heard the rationale of why we run and busy break we neck to make these children take this exam in the midst of a global catastrophe, or they've prepared and we don't want to stress them out further, just let them do the exam, because it's more mental stress to make them wait, ting. You rush and you make them take the exam, and this is what you will do them on the back end? This is what you will do them on the back end? Hannah, it take a special kind of beast, you know. A special kind of beast. I'm sorry, I don't have the gentleman's name, the gentleman who's been speaking primarily on behalf of CXC. But you know what I love? They submitted a report pretty much taking a whole lot of, you know when people take responsibility for something without actually saying they're taking responsibility for something?
Yeah.
Right. Where they said they would when people need to apply for fees or whatever, they would waive up to a certain point. I know Trinidad and Tobago came out and said that you would only have to pay 50% of what you would usually pay if you want to query a grade. Prime Minister of the Caribbean, Mia Mottley, we stand a legend and a queen, came out and said, Bajans don't beg. Yeah? Bajans don't beg. We will pay for children to get the we will pay for children to get the waiver. Bajans don't beg. That is what Mia say. Mia say the Bajans will pay for their children for the waiver, and as a result now all of the ministers of education throughout the Caribbean jumped on. I feel like Mia put a little shame in their eye.
And as she should.
And everybody jumped on board and has started to lobby CXC to completely remove having to pay to query grades this year. Not when there is so much, when so many students have been affected by incomplete grades, by grades that just not making no kind of sense. Like, what did you expect to happen? It is a global pandemic. Everybody has been, every system throughout the world has been affected somehow by what has been going on. You really thought that CXC and Cape would have remained unscathed? Really?
And if ever there was a year when parents would have the time to deal
if it's one thing parents
with
have,
CXC,
it's time.
Year. You know why? Because they invested this year.
Thank you.
This year they know what it is to sit down with their children at home and see
very well. That is their grades.
And knows what it takes to get through a term. This is the year.
Mommy and daddy is saying that is our grades. That is not just your. That is our
and
grades.
And to watch your child go to our exam with a mask on.
This is what I'm saying. Like this kind of trauma. So Mike, you know, apart from the what the fuck though, apart from that, like my other questions are, like, why was it so necessary to rush the exam? And obviously the dissemination of the results. Because there must have been some inkling that something wasn't right.
Yeah.
Like you must have realized that something wasn't right. That's one. Two, for the love of Yoruba God, what is our obsession with exams in the Caribbean?
Well, I mean, you said it before, post-colonial territories. This is how we prove that we are worthy. This is how we prove we are people.
So
we're better than the next one.
A whole lot of ego.
Yeah.
That's what we put our children through, for a whole lot of ego. A whole lot of ego. Okay, cool. Would the children have really been any worse off if we had waited and recalibrated? Like, just take a minute.
Or develop systems that match the times.
Thank you very much. Because if you, like I said, if the rationale was you didn't want to put them under undue mental and emotional duress. So you said, okay, we're going to go through with the exams because we don't want them to be stressed out unnecessarily. And then you do this.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, would they really have been worse off then? Would they have? And finally, are we ready, as you said, to talk about reforms yet? Are we ready now? Now that this is a big fat catastrophe this year, are we ready to talk about, alternatives? Like, we are we okay with just sending children to school to write exams in perpetuity? Because that is all children really go to school for, to write exam. Because that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
We okay with it? Like, when you think about the fact that the visual and performing arts teachers had to literally almost stage a coup to get CXC to understand that the format with which they wanted to execute the exam, the VAPA exam this year, within this COVID-19 context, could not work. And it's like, the amount of people had to lobby with them on their behalf. They had to go to tutor. They had to, for CXC to actually say, wait, no, this is not really making sense, Really?
Because to these entities, the main stakeholder, unfortunately, the main stakeholders, I should say, are not the students, nor the parents, nor the teachers. So if you're not catering to the interests of students, parents, and teachers, we have to ask, who are the stakeholders that you are really catering to?
Who gets
capitalism again more important than education?
Who is getting the money that you had to pay to query your grade? Mm-hmm. And they only give you back the money if they realize the grade wrong. This is what I've told. I've never queried.
Probably the same account, the 2400 to get published in a textbook going to.
The shade. We do love the shade.
Oh gosh, Trinidad and Tobago, we are recording today under an immortal tree.
This is what I'm saying. A whole immortal. So yeah, that's pretty much my answer. That CXC only have real things to answer. Because if I have to read one more story, but what's all they put in these children through? Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, man. Yeah, so that was the answer. That
Nina Simone has this song called "Goddamn Alabama."
Mississippi, goddamn.
Goddamn CXC.
Jeez.
Goddamn.
Jeez. You know what? Let's just move straight into the how we spending our money and wrap it up with a swiftness. So y'all remember Thema Williams? Remember the fabulous gymnast that Trinidad and Tobago was invested in robbing of her experience at the Olympics because we wanted dick instead?
What?
You remember
when you said
Dick?
that, I was thinking about sex, but I am
you now get it.
Brought.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I have clarity now.
You have
I'm not
clarity
thinking
now.
about that dick. I think
You're
about
welcome.
the person.
The person.
Okay. All right,
The dick. Anyway, but we're not gonna sully this particular moment for Thema. Thema has been doing amazing things. When you talk about somebody who is resilient, who is just full of promise and optimism despite all of the things that may have been handed to her, because I go in and be honest, if I was Thema all now, so I bitter. Here now, I bitter like her Riley,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be bitter like Aloes to the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I'd have been real vexed forever. But obviously Thema is a much better woman than I am.
I wouldn't say better. I would say different and deals with things in another way.
Better, different, same thing. She's been doing brilliant things. She's an artist. She's a visual artist, as well as she has been honing her skills as a fashion designer. She is brilliant. It's beautiful. Her stuff is just amazing. So I want to encourage you to go across to Instagram and search at Art by Thema. It's literally Art by Thema, ARTBYTHEMA, and you can see all of her work, the pieces that she's done recently, and she's self-taught, while she's had people assisting her, and she will always give credit to the folks who've assisted her with the sewing and whatnot, she's not one of those people who will, you know, people sewing on her behalf and then you go on an international platform and claim it as yours. Anyway,
I am taking a look at it. I'm seeing some really great resort wear.
Yep. There was one particular
Suited to our
piece
climates, yes.
that I really, really loved. But, you know, in these poor COVID times, you know, I said, Thema, I would like you to get an immediate sale for it. So please don't hold it for me. So she has beautiful work. She's also a visual artist as well in terms of the kind of work she does with her paintings and stuff. If you scroll further down, I think you would see, no, this is the page specifically geared towards her fashion line, but she also has work that she does as an artist as well. If you search Thema Williams as well, there we go. And I know some of those pieces are also up for sale as well. So this is a time where, you know, everybody is, you know, all creatives would value any interest shown, any opportunity to make income off of their creativity. So feel free to check out both the Art by Thema page, where you can specifically see her new fashion line, as well as you can check out Thema Williams as well on Instagram, where you would see some of her other work. And then, of course, just remember what a brilliant gymnast she is as well.
Yeah.
Which is always just amazing.
And just support this young woman.
She deserves it.
I mean, just a
she
reflection
deserves
on the
it.
depth of that resilience
Yeah.
in that year.
Trinidad and Tobago, I am saying it. She would never say it, but I'm saying we owe her that much.
Yeah.
We really do owe her that much in terms of supporting her endeavors moving forward. So
and we continue to side-eye the Gymnastics Association.
Hey, forever.
Forever.
In perpetuity.
That side-eye stick.
Listen. And the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, but I mean, that's another thing. That's a separate story. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much it. TNT episode 6. We've made it through Rock the Boat 868, the podcast, as usual. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have to say thank you so much to Auntie Penny and Necessary Arts. We're here again today.
Yeah.
Abigail, don't feel we forget it. We're coming back by Splice. So don't feel so.
That's we friend.
How you mean?
That is we friend.
But we're spreading the love around, right? Thank you so much, TNT. Feel free to, leave your comments. Let us know how you feel. We're always grateful for the feedback and all that good stuff. Yeah?
Okay.
Have a great one.
Bye.